As producers, we're creatures of habit and we tend to stick to things that we know, the methods, the techniques that we've learned over years because we know that they work. And it's weird because when new software comes along or a new plugin comes along, we see all these new features and we get all hyped up about these new things that are going to transform us, that are going to make us so much better producers or improve our sound. But then we just fall into old habits again and we get used to doing it that way. In this video today, I want to show you a few features of Ableton Live that you might have spotted, you might be using, you might not be using, but believe me, they're really handy. So let's not waste any time and kick things off with one of my favourite features that came out of Ableton 10, and that's collections. Now, if you're like me, you get a bit frustrated with using the browser within Ableton. If you've got a big sample collection or a lot of instruments, then trying to find what you want to can be a bit of a pain. You can use the awesome search feature, but it can still take a while to find the stuff that you want to, especially if you've got a whole load of folders and a whole load of things in different folders that you have to then go in and out to try and find the same thing, and you can be there for a while. The most important thing about music production is having things there quickly so you can kind of strike when creativity hits you. And that's the great thing about collections, is that they are favorites folders. So they are folders full of stuff that you use regularly or things that you need very, very quickly at your fingertips. So the way I use collections is that I kind of group the stuff that I use on a regular basis. So say for example, I've got a collection of kicks, I've got a collection of top loops, I've got a collection of effects. These are all things that I need to reach to and get to very, very quickly. So take for example my kicks collection. Now this is a collection that I've started up just to house all the kicks that I use regularly. So they might be one-shot samples, they might be loops. They're things that I have in my sample collection that I want to get to quite regularly, and I don't want to keep going in and out of folders all the time. I want all those kicks very, very quickly at my fingertips, so I can just drag and drop them straight into a brand new project. Now when I start a track, I want to get things going as quickly as possible, so I tend to use a lot of top loops. They're very quick ways of kind of getting a rough beat in there, so you can start riffing and coming up with some synth lines or a bass line or anything else like that, and then I might replace them a bit later. Now that's why I've got a collection full of top loops. Now these of course can be spread across your whole hard drive in a whole load of different sample packs. So what I've done is I've gone through each sample pack and picked out the top loops that I use the most and put them into this tops collection. They're really, really quickly at my fingertips whenever I need them. Perhaps my most used collection is my effects one, and this is a collection of effects that I use on a regular basis. So they might be audio effects or MIDI effects, those things that I kind of reach for all the time. So say for example in that folder I've got a whole load of presets for the chord device because I tend to use that quite a lot in my productions. I've also got the scale plugin set up for a minor chord, which again is one of those things that I use really, really regular. I've also got an external audio effect set up within there ready routed to my analog heat. It's one of those things that I can just drag and drop straight into my project and start using. Now, of course, you've got the whole collection, you've got your whole browser, and you can kind of do that within the browser. But having those collection folders just makes it so much quicker to get to those things that you need to very, very quickly when inspiration hits. Now, I've been using collections for a little while, so I've customized it quite heavily to how I work. But you can customize it to however you work, for example. Now, when you first start using collections, they're all labeled up as colors. So you've got the red, you've got the yellow, which doesn't make much sense to you maybe. But you can change this. So if you wanted to have a bass folder, for example, maybe a whole lot of instruments that you use for bass, or maybe some loops in there that you use for bass, or one shots, you can create a bass collection and then add stuff to it. And adding stuff to a collection is really, really easy. You can just right click on any audio effect, any MIDI effect, any sample, and you'll see that the collections are right there at your fingertips. You can even use shortcuts on the keyboard to easily, quickly add them to your collection. So yeah, definitely collections is one of those things that I really recommend using. It makes you so much quicker. And as I've always said, when you're in the zone and you're producing, you want to do stuff really quickly. Otherwise, you can kind of lose that enthusiasm, that kind of drive to make the track because it's just taking too long. So having those things at quick reference is really, really handy. Okay, so next up is Max for Live. Now, this is one of those things that you probably have looked at or you've heard about and you thought that's way too geeky for me. I'm not going to get into it. So, Max for Live, if you're not sure what it is, basically it's this whole programming element of Ableton. It's like a third party library that's built into Ableton that allows you to create your own instruments or your own audio effects, and you can deep dive into this. You can get proper geeky with it and start making all your own instruments. But that's only half of it. There's also a whole load of pre-built instruments and effects in there that are very handy to use. Now, these things might look quite complicated at first, but actually some of them can be used really well. So for example, there is a shaper plugin within there. So if you've invested or if you're thinking investing in a third party plugin to do some volume shaping, for example, I'm a big fan of the LFO tool. It's one of those things I've used for years. But you can achieve the same kind of thing with the Max for Live shaper plugin. So you can easily just put that on a track and you can map it to any control within Ableton. So you can take any control on a synth and map it to the shaper tool. So you could use it to shape a filter, or you could use it to shape the volume. There's so many different uses for it because it's a standalone piece of kit that is tied into Ableton so heavily that you can use it with any parameter and do these most amazing things with. So before you buy that shaper plugin and you spend all that money on it, why not check out the Max for Live plugin? It might do what you want it to do. And to be honest, it's one of those things that I've started using more and more in my productions. Now, one of my other favorite plugins from the Max for Life section is the LFO plugin. Now, I know most synthesizers and samplers have their own LFOs built in, but sometimes they don't work how you want them to be, or you can't map them to the things that you want to. Well, that's where the Max for Life LFO plugin can probably help. You can actually map it to anything within Ableton, just like the shaper tool. So you can take it and you can map it to the filter on a synth, or you can map it to the sample length on a sampler, for example. You can map it to pretty much any control that you can automate. So you can create some really crazy things, or you can use it in really subtle ways, and it's really easy to set up. And finally, one of my favourite MIDI effects within the Max for Life section is the step sequencer. And I use it all the time. It really works for my kind of music. Now, I know a lot of synths and samplers have their own step sequencers built in, but a lot don't. And I actually like the simplicity of this step sequencer. It can be used in loads of different ways and it's very easy to use. You just drop it on a MIDI channel before any synth or any sampler, and you can just start programming in notes with it. And one of my favorite features is the swing knob on it. So you can dial in how much swing or how much shuffle that you want within that step sequencer. Now that becomes really kind of cool when you start creating snare build-ups or start doing fills or start doing some jack in house stuff with it. So putting it before a sampler, putting some snare sounds in there or some hi-hat sounds in there, start programming in some offbeat kind of notes, and then adding that swing to it can really help that kind of groove. And it's one of those things that I reach to every time when I'm making a track. Next up, we have keyboard shortcuts. Now, this is one of those things that you really need to know if you want to move around Ableton at a good speed. If you're always going to the menus and you're selecting the things from the menus or right-clicking on things all the time, selecting the menus there, you're just wasting so much time, and you just need to get to use those keyboard shortcuts. It's one of those things where you learn it once and you practice it, and then all of a sudden it just becomes second nature. It's like muscle memory. You just hit that without even thinking about it. One of my favorite features of Ableton 10.1, which I went over in the last video, is that you can now use the Z and the X key to zoom into things. Ever since they brought that in and I started using it, honestly, it is so much quicker than zooming in any other way. It transforms how you navigate Ableton, and you just move through it so quickly. So definitely take the time to look at those keyboard shortcuts. If you go to the menus of Ableton, next to almost every single function, there is a keyboard shortcut. So just memorize those and you'll become so much quicker within Ableton. Okay, so let's talk delay. Now, which is your favorite Ableton delay plugin? Now, some of you might like the simple delay. I personally love the ping pong delay. It's one of those things I've used for years, and it works brilliantly on things like vocals. However, have you checked out the echo plugin? It's one of those audio effects that was brought in with Ableton 10, and as soon as I started checking it out and playing around with it, I absolutely fell in love with it. Now, my favorite feature is the feedback. Now, on all the other delays within Ableton, the feedback goes up to 95%. Now, this gives you a really nice long tail. It works really well. However, with the echo plugin, it can go over 100%. Now, this means you get a dub delay kind of effect. The feedback starts feeding back on itself, and it starts getting louder and louder with every repetition. Now, this can work really well in breakdowns, and that's where I tend to use it quite a bit. So if you've got a vocal in there, for example, you might want to take that last bit of vocal and then echo it out. With the echo plugin, you can use the feedback at over 100%, so maybe 105%, and have that echo getting louder and louder and louder as the build up happens. Now, this works really well for a build up, and it's one of those simple things that are quite easy to set up. That's what makes the Echo plugin so great for me. I absolutely love it. Now, it does have a whole load of other features that makes it a killer delay. It has the low cut, high cut. It has the ability to do the ping pong as well. So there's all the other features in there that you love from the other delays. So I definitely think you should check it out. Now, the final thing I want to talk about are Ableton Packs. Now, these are collections of samples, instruments, audio effects, all made by Ableton and sold on their website. But depending on the version of Ableton you've got, you might have even got some of these for free. Now, have you installed these? Have you had a look at these? There are some killer sounds within here. So before you buy the next synth or next instrument that you want to buy, check out these packs and see what's within them, because they are free samples that you were given with your version of Ableton. Also, have you checked out the Ableton website recently? Because they're adding to these packs all of the time, and quite occasionally they give them out free for people who have bought Ableton. So for example, if you've bought Ableton Standard or Ableton Suite, you would have missed out on a whole load of new packs that were added recently that you can download for free. And there are some amazing patches and sounds and samples, things in there that can really help you. So definitely check out those packs. So I hope that's been useful to you. If it has, give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't already, it would really help me out, and also hit that notification icon so you're notified whenever I upload a brand new video. I've got a whole load more content like this on my channel, so definitely check that out, and I'll see you again in the next video.